I want to share an insight with you that I just had, and I thought that it would be easier to understand if I draw it out. And this insight is at the intersection of madness, psychosis maybe, and Krishnamurti, and David Bohm. They had a conversation series, a series of dialogues called The Ending of Time. So this might make sense to you if you've listened to or studied this series. And I'm curious what you see from the insight I had. But it also relates to my lived experience of psychosis and extraordinary states. So it may still have some relevance if you've experienced madness or psychosis, but especially if you have also studied a bit of Krishnamurti and David Bohm. So I'll try and draw this out, and it just came to me, so we'll see how this goes. So in the beginning of the series, Krishnamurti and David Bohm, they talk about a question, and it is, has humanity taken a wrong turn? And spoiler alert, they decide that yes, humanity has taken a wrong turn. Yes. And what is the wrong turn? Well, the wrong turn is thought. And if you don't know about this series of dialogues, you can think of thought like the self. The thought creates the self, which is the center. And then the center, which is the I, perspective, is this observer that observes the world as something separate, right? So here's the world, the observed. So there's a separation here. And now this separation is said to be false, right? So it's actually not separate, it's a false separation. And so this sense of separation is also called, an illusion. Now, this isn't anything new so far. And there's so many ways to say this or go about coming to these concepts or understandings. So this center here is made of thought. It's the thoughts like I thoughts, or the thoughts that we think are our own thoughts, the thoughts we think about the world, the observer and the observed. And so, in a sense, if there is what they call pure observation, you basically have the world. Oh, that's supposed to be blue. Right? And then you have, we'll just draw this, the I in it, right? You have the I, and you're in the world, you're not separate from it. And when you see in pure observation, you actually see a different world. You don't see this world through this veil, right? You see a different world. Now, what is that exactly? Like, even Krishnamurti doesn't go into it in great detail because it's not a static thing. So what it is for you could be different than another person who sees it through their perspective. I don't know, I just made that up. He didn't say that, but he didn't say much about it. So we can see that this perspective might be seen as the right turn, in quotes, right turn. And then this is the wrong turn. Now we're going to go into, like, is it a wrong turn or is it something a little different? So I've been thinking about this because I've been listening to the dialogues in the evening, kind of as I'm going to sleep, and then the next day I'll listen to the next part or whatever. And something that I was seeing, so this is just something I sort of saw myself, was that it seemed like here's the human eye. Oh. So here's the human eye. To me, it kind of seemed I know I have a pink one around here somewhere, but I can't find it. So we're gonna have an orange brain. This is the brain for now. So we'll just imagine that this person is looking at a person. So I was seeing this wrong turn as follows. And this isn't the insight I want to get to eventually, but so here, this with the wrong turn pen, this light from this person, this information, goes to the eye and then makes the wrong turn into like the lower energy part of the brain. And this is just a rough sketch. It's not like how it works actually physiologically, right? So this is the wrong turn. And we could just pretend that this part is the eye, right? And so the eye is having thoughts. It's projecting thoughts of what's going on. And it thinks, because it thinks, so it thinks it sees what is, right? But it's actually seeing what it thinks it sees because it's thinking. So that makes this wrong turn, and it's a cycle, right? So thought, so it's seeing what thought is saying about not even what is, right? It's just, so this is sort of that veil. That veil is happening here. And so in the second version, and I was just going to draw over top, but that would get really messy. So we can go into the brain. So again, this is the I, the observer, and it's saying what it observes or observed, right? So there's a separation, but really the observer is of the I and thought is of the I. So it's actually thought and thought. So the way thought thinks, it separates itself into an observer and an observed. And so this isn't exactly related, but Krishnamurti says many times, like one of his famous quotes is, the observer is the observed. So he's saying we are this observed. There's no observer observing the observed. This could probably take a whole nother diagram, but anyway, we won't go into that fully. And the thing is, what he says is the observer is not. And so when the observer is not, the observed is not. And this thinking process isn't going on, and you might see what is. This is my understanding of it. So then in this instance, we have the pure observation. So we have pure observation. And so we have what is. Now, what is? What is? We can just leave that question, right, for now. So to go with that, with this light, we're imagining the light is going into the whole brain, not just this partial partitioned part that has decided that this is the perspective of self, that it's going to see through and comment on life through. So the whole brain would see and say something different, right? It would see and say what is, and not what the self is thinking. Now, we don't need to go there right now. That's very nuanced. So this is what I was kind of seeing. And so what I was seeing is that this kind of bending of the light by thought, of light, light is going into our eyes by thought, that warping is a wrong turn. The light is literally turning incorrectly. Warping. Light. So I was just seeing what they were saying at the level of sort of light and the eye and the brain. So that, from that level, that's what I saw. Rather than saying, taking a wrong turn and just, imagining a human walking down the wrong path at a fork in a road. So then here, this is the right turn or not turning at all, right? The right turn, not turning. However you want to put it. And we could go into so much just around this here, but that's not necessarily where I wanted to go with that, with this. So here we have this right turn, or this non-turn, or this non-warping. Via the of the self. So the thing that I saw to add to this, I just saw, and it was experiential. So I was just having a dialogue with myself for about 2 hours. So I could like just talk with myself about stuff like this for hours. And a lot of my own insights. Most of them don't relate to Krishnamurti or Dr. Bohm or things like that. So what I saw was, after being in dialogue with myself for 2 hours, I was going to have some dinner. And I was having pierogies. So here's my pierogies. And so I was having dinner, and then all of a sudden I had a bit of a scary thought come to mind. I won't say what it was exactly, but something about danger for somebody, and I was noticing it. And it was faint, but I can feel the strain in my heart a bit of, say, worry. And this theme has happened to me before in, say, like madness and psychosis. And I'm not in psychosis, but these things can still kind of pop in a little bit. But what it is sometimes, like in the after the 2 hour dialogue, I went into some pretty new stuff that I hadn't really talked about before. So it was like a new insight. So if I think about how I have a bunch of insights that I've been pondering and extrapolating and so much over the years, like over the last 10 years, right? But every now and then I sort of move into new territory. So it's like, so you could think of this as, like, for myself at least, I'll say it's kind of like a non-turn or a right turn, because I'm seeing something of what is. Now, it's already gone by, so it's not what is anymore, it's what was. But at the moment, it was what is, right? So sometimes when I move into new territory, I'll just call it that, the recoil is a bit scary. It can bring up sort of fear, just a little bit. Especially now, it's just a little bit. It's not like anything major. But I was really, really sitting there and feeling into it. And I decided, there's nothing to be afraid of. But then why is this sensation or this thought coming in? And so that brought me up to feeling like it's a thought, right? It's a wrong turn. So this was like an insight. An insight is like a flash of light, right? Krishnamurti talks a lot about insight, and I sense it the way that he talks about it, though it's perhaps not the only way. So it's just having, you could almost call it a new thought, but it's an insight. Like, it's something that has never come to my mind before, sort of out of the blue. And I tend to write these down and document them. So I was talking about some insights that I had recently. And I think also giving voice to them is a bit more intense than just writing them down and putting that piece of paper in a drawer or something like that, right? So as I'm eating, I have so here's the insight. It goes like turning this way. I'll just say, like, energetically. We just pretend, right? And like, it gives some energy, it gives information, right? Probably it probably increases entropy a bit, right? Like chaos in the system. And then sometime later, I'm sitting there eating, and in comes a scary thought, right? A wrong turn, a supposed wrong turn, but this is what I saw. So here we go, turning this way. So what I saw was that the scary thought was for me to turn back, right? To turn back. It was about somebody that I know, right? So imagine if I thought that thought was true, I might want to go like check up on somebody or whatever like that. So when I realized, it was a thought causing me to turn back, I sensed something here, and it's quite nuanced. And this relates to non-ordinary experiences in general, but it could relate to just adapting to this in daily life as well. So a lot of people who go into like non-ordinary states or crisis or extraordinary states or, mania or psychosis or whatever, they might have like for me, it went on for a long time, for say a month. So there's insight, turning into more energy, more information, kind of more chaos, right? Because the information doesn't necessarily fit into my mental models, or even the mental models I had at the time to be able to communicate them, right? So as I'm going all the way here, eventually, a lot of times people start to encounter things that are scary, and it causes like a decline, right? Or however, I won't go into the details of that. There's lots of information out there. But what I saw was this process of turning back. So this process of what they were calling wrong turn, I'm seeing in this insight I'm having about the process as like turning back. So there's still a wrong turn involved, in that doing this wrong turn over and over seemed to create the I, right? This perspective of I, like it's self-enclosed around itself by turning the wrong way, if we put it that way. But in a sense, what I saw through this process after having insights and being in dialogue about it, and then having this scary thought and being like, what is this? Like, why is it like scaring me? So obviously this kind of lowers energy. And what the thought was saying was something that is actually less entropy, because it's sort of basic actions would be required rather than integrating these big insights that I was having. So it's kind of like, okay, lower the energy, lower the entropy. You went so far, like it's time to turn back. So maybe if in my mind there was a way in consciousness to turn back without getting scared by thought, that would be different, right? Like, say I knew, well, if I talk for 2 hours about insights and some of them are really far out there, then I got to turn back. Now, what does that mean, like turning back? Now, it can be something as simple as it's good to retake the perspective of I, because it's functional, right? It's for survival. It's meant for probably physical survival more than psychological survival. So there is a function there, but what I saw relates to this process of thought coming back to scare oneself back to lower energy, to scare the brain back to lower energy or whatever, is so a person doesn't go too far, right? Because once you go too far into insights, it's like you've seen too much. And that's sometimes how it feels for me, that I've seen too much or I know too much. Like our brain doesn't want to know the complete underlying structure of everything for some reason. It's like once we see the game, it's like the game feels like it could be over. So part of it is when this happens and there's this big dip back to thought and like lower levels of energy and everything, a lot of times we sort of forget a lot of these things that we saw, right? So even if we saw them, it's like, it's really not game over. It's just like, okay, you got to go back to this game of lower energy of the brain and not see those things all the time, or kind of forget about them, at least for now. I don't think we have to forget about them ultimately, and that's something that I do, is like, that's how I built this mesh of meaning, is to go back into these things that I learned here or saw and try to learn and integrate them into this mesh of meaning. And so even a regular state of consciousness, which I am now, I can still have insights and see new things. I don't need to be in a non-ordinary state. So that's one thing that I think at least my brain has learned to take what we're calling the right turn and see insights. And I don't have to be in a non-ordinary state. So that's why, for me, just having just a little scary thought as like an afterglow is just a small thing, right? Whereas if I didn't have this type of adaptation that I built through building this, then I'd go like up, 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 and then crash down. But what I was able to see, because it was just this little micro experience, was, it's not only about going too far and then coming back, but it's also so we don't go too far into insights and seeing more and more and more without other people seeing it, without others. And it relates to the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go together. So we can go fast into insights, and sometimes the brain does that. But then there's a mechanism that scares the brain to turning back, because if we're all in this seeing into insights, we've almost gone ahead of the state of the world in consciousness. And so we're almost like not even, I'm not sure what the process is there exactly, like if I really thought about it, and I probably have thought about it and outlined it, but I won't do that here. I won't go off on that tangent. But we're almost like completely alone, like we almost don't exist. We're almost non-existential. Again, I'm not going to say the mechanisms or how that works exactly, but we can't exist going that far without the consciousness of all going up. And this isn't something like magical or special. Like, this is how we have evolved from hunter-gatherers to now, right? People sharing their insights and their learning, and it becoming part of the collective. So sometimes it can happen where somebody goes into that insights learning. So that means, in a way, that consciousness can't really go too far without everyone, because if you've done any spiritual reading, it is one consciousness, right? So it's almost like you pinch yourself off from everything, and the energy of consciousness kind of might be sort of pinched off. Whereas, like, if somebody wants to be the strongest person in the world, they can literally work so hard to be the strongest person in the world, and nobody comes close to their ability, and that's fine, right? But in consciousness, it doesn't really work that way. It's meant to be shared. The insights are meant to be shared, and we're likely meant to have a better process for listening to those who have non-ordinary states and insights, but we don't, right? We don't have that. We hospitalize people, and we don't listen. And I'm not here to criticize that or anything, but if you can listen to somebody who has insights, even if they sound strange, it would probably go a long way. That's why I've listened to myself over the years, because I can listen to myself as much as I want to or can. So this is one process, like going far off into it and then the crash and sort of starting again with the process. But what I was seeing here, now this gets back to Krishnamurti. And one of the insights I saw is that it seems that thought, others, but also it doesn't. Now, what do I mean by that? So it's thought, right, that creates the self, the I, and the observed, this person over here. But what I see here, and why this might not be a wrong turn, is that possibly, ideally, I don't know if that's a good word, possibly ideally though, we'll just say it, possibly ideally, this process here, the brain and the I don't know why the brain got so far away. Let's just connect the brain to the I. So when the brain and the I has an insight, so it sees something, we'll just call it some kind of what is, an insight. And it creates like an aha, right? Then we actually say something. We say the insight, say what is. Well, that's kind of skipping ahead. So this is the right turn, we're calling it. And instead of thought being a wrong turn in its design, like in its innate purpose, this insight turns into a thought, right? It's communicated as a thought. Well, how is that turning back? Well, in a few ways, it's turning back. So one is that if this I sees something and then says it, is going to say it to somebody. So speak to somebody. So that means this I and brain is turning back, to even turning to the side if they're walking beside someone, to speak it to someone in the form of a thought. It's an insight, but it's taking the form of a thought. It's being spoken out loud, right? This I brain couldn't have an insight and just not share it. So the turning back is the ability to put an insight into a thought and communicate it. So that one of the purposes is to communicate, right? So thought is, in this scenario, it's more about communicating an insight, which is seeing what is. Now, generally, this wrong turn up here is that thought creates a self by thinking to itself that it's thinking something about what is that's not even, it's not true. And that's part of the deception. It thinks it's seeing what is by talking all the time, or however it works in a person's brain that creates this sense of separation. It might not be through verbalized thoughts inside one's head, right? Now, if we don't do this, if we don't have an insight and communicate it through thought, then that's when it creates, when we're thinking thoughts, then it just creates this loop, which creates this center that is a self. And then when we have this self center, The trouble is that insight is not possible. Insight's not possible, because if we're looking at illusion and what thought is saying, we can't have an insight into what is happening, some aspect of what is happening in that moment. And in general, that seems to be what it is, that what is something that choiceless awareness chooses. Now you'd have to read a bit of Krishnamurti to understand choiceless awareness. I've never said choiceless awareness chooses before. It sounds funny, but so here we have the right turn. Choiceless awareness generates an insight, and then it's shared in thought. Maybe just thought in the mind, but it's not like an I thought, or written down or communicated to somebody. Now the thing is, if somebody communicates what is, that are their insights, and somebody happens to listen, it might actually open up the center, because they see the insight, they see what this person saw of what is, rather than the common perceptions that we see day to day because of the way that we're programmed, right? So I guess we can write a little summary up here. And again, this is just something I saw. I don't know about it. It seems to me to add a little bit to the Ending of Time series. Maybe they even get to that. I'm on about like conversation 8 right now. They do say that thought seems to be making a wrong turn constantly. So like wrong turn at second 1, wrong turn at second 2, wrong turn at second 3. It's not that through time like this, there's this wrong turn like this and we're doomed. It's actually just, I don't know about the word just, but getting to this moment where there's the I, right? Without this constant activity going on. So here's, silence, you want to call it that. So this eye, this eyeball and brain may have an insight, this right turn. And then as this eyeball gets to this moment, they turn to their friend over here and they say, "What is?" And then this turning back is no longer a wrong turn. So I guess the way that it might add to it is that they do talk about where thought is necessary, like in life, and where it's not. And so I don't think I'm really saying anything new. I'm just saying that the thing that creates the wrong turn, thought, that with overemphasis creates the self, when used, creates a turning back to share an insight when it's used in service of insight. And they say that thought can be used to communicate insight. I don't think it's the only way to communicate insight. It doesn't always have to be in words. That's not the only thing that insight does. It's a lot more than that. The trouble is that when thought takes over our life, it takes the predominant stance, and then we don't have access to insight. And then I can't remember what that last point was, but yeah, so that was kind of the insight. And it's so funny because at the beginning I kind of thought, oh, this is something a bit new. The only thing it's new, I think, is the wrong turn, wrong turn, wrong turn. This process here creates a self, whereas insight sometimes is communicated through thought, and that means that thought isn't always a wrong turn. It's a turning back or a turning to share the insight via thought, which is what they said insight is sometimes communicated as thought, or insight can use thought to communicate, because a flash of light and insight is way bigger than even what one can communicate in thought. So it's, there's part of the insight that moves on anyway, right, with this person, but there's part that can be shared. And this is actually part of what is difficult to figure out how to do, because I don't think it's necessarily natural to always share insights or to try. But in the current world situation, it seems like turning back with thought is something that, and sharing insights through thought is some thing to do, is one thing to do. It's not the only thing to do. And so you see something new, insight, you see a new insight, it's a flash of light type process, and then you turn back with thought to tell others. So that makes it not a wrong turn, and that relates to sharing it with the consciousness of humanity, right? Because without sharing, and perhaps it naturally wants to share, then the person who has the insight can easily go off into nothingness, whatever that means. So for me, this means, or shows more light on learning to share insights. And for someone like me who's gone through psychosis or madness, generally people don't listen. That's just the way it is, and that's okay. But the thing is, it takes more work to figure out what to say and when and why. And at the end of the day, just engaging with it in one's own consciousness may be enough, because our consciousness is all one. So anything we learn, insights do add to the collective consciousness, whether we share them through thought or not. So in that way, maybe it is a wrong turn to try to attempt to share insights through thoughts. I don't know. That's the thing. There's no solid answer. That's what is. It's moving, right? It's learning. It's having an insight and then forgetting about it. So that's where it went. I've never really written things out like this, but I figured, why not? So I hope you like this, and if you want to be in dialogue about any of this, again, I don't know anything, but dialogue is a way to be in a movement of what is together, or move into what is, possibly. Peace out.